begin.
Welcome everybody to wisetake.com MMA DFS podcast. I'm your host Jeff, aka Wigsplitter. Today we're going to be going over UFC 217, Bisping versus GSP. But before we get into that, if you're not already a subscriber, head on over to wisetake.com, and currently we are offering a 7-day free trial where you will have access to premium content covering NBA, NFL, MMA. And then also, if you could head on over to Facebook, follow us on Facebook at WiseTake, and then head on over to Twitter. You can follow us at wise_take. You can follow me at JEFPO. But before we get into the main UFC 217 action, let's go over UFC Fight Night 117, Brunson versus Machida. I went 7-5 in my overall picks. I went a little risky on a couple of them. Also, two of the decisions didn't necessarily go my way. The Figueroa-Brooks fight, I think that could have been 50-50 on that one. And then Santos versus Griffin, that was a complete slugfest. That was a coin toss from the very beginning. Both of them landed and staggered each other multiple times within the fight. It did receive Fight of the Night bonus. Maia versus Covington, I went with Maia. I was in the thought process of thinking, well, he's fought a couple of Covington's teammates. He's probably figured out that, he's going to have to take him down, blah, blah, blah. It didn't work out that way. It ended up being a stand-up match. Covington basically tattooed Maia, and then Maia gassed by the end of the fight, and Covington took it. All right, so let's move on into UFC 217. Bisping versus GSP. The first fight on the prelims is Ayman Zahabi versus Ricardo Ramos. Both these guys are 1-0 in the UFC. Zahabi is the younger brother of Faris Zahabi. He's the head trainer at TriStar Gym, where GSP trains at, and a lot of other fighters. In his first fight, you can tell he was a little nervous. His nerves made him a little tentative, but I think he's within a couple fights, I think he's going to do really well. And Ramos, he went up against a very formidable Japanese fighter, Michihori Tanaka. And majority of the Japanese fighters, they're very gritty, grindy type fighters. They're gonna make you work for your victory. So both these guys are coming off of wins. Zahabi, his salary is $8,700. He's a plus 105 underdog, and Ramos is $7,500, and he's a minus 125 favorite. Depending on how the roster build goes, I might take a flyer and take Ramos. Depending on if I have the salary available. Zahabi, 8,700 is pretty steep. I'm not completely sure if I would want to roster that high of a grappling. I mean, this could either be a grappling battle, or it could be possible that these guys cancel each other out on the feet or on the mat, and then it just turns into a striking battle, which possibly could benefit Zahabi, but we'll have to see. Moving on to the next fight, we have Michael. I'm going to murder this. Oleksiejczuk. He's 7,100 salary, plus 395 underdog. Going against Ian Kudalaba, 9,100 salary, is a minus 495 favorite. Personally, I think this fight has Fight of the Night written all over it. Both these guys are strikers. Oleksiejczuk is taking this fight on short notice, and he's making his UFC debut. So it could either be boom or bust for this guy. He does have insane knockout power, and he's currently riding a 9-fight win streak. Kudalaba, is 2-2 in the UFC. He's a wrestler by trade, but he has vicious power and he likes to keep the fight standing. So he uses his wrestling as defense to keep the fight up on the feet, where he looks for the knockout. I'm gonna have to look for more film on Oleksichuk, see how he is. But Kudalaba at 9,100, depending on how I feel, if I want to go for heavy GPP knockout power, I'm probably going to lean towards Kudalaba in my build, but it all depends on how your roster starts to work itself out, because 9,100 is a pretty big hit, and then both these guys aren't necessarily seasoned veterans when it comes to fighting, so we'll see how it works out. Moving on to the next fight, we have the Alexei the Boa Constrictor Olenek going against Curtis Razor Blades. Olenek is 8,200 salary. He's 52-10-1. He's a plus 325 underdog going up against Curtis Blades. 8,000 salary, and he's a minus 400 favorite. Olenek is a Sambo fighter. He's high level submission artist. He has 45 wins by submission. A lot of people discount that just because of some of the guys that, or majority of the guys he's beaten, aren't necessarily the greatest names in MMA, but at the same time, a lot of people label him a journeyman. But most journeymans, the reason they're sticking around so long is because they are tough, strong fighters. Not necessarily tin cans, but they're going to go in there and give you their all. Blades, on the other hand, he's a grappler striker. He's 2-1 in the UFC. Very strong power. He's wrestling base. He's going to want to try to probably keep the fight standing and stay out of Olenek's submission attempts. At 8,000 and 8,200, both these guys, I want to see how the weigh-ins go. I mean, with heavyweights, it's not necessarily too critical, but at the same time, I just want to see if they're if they look bloated or if they look lethargic of some sort. But I could see trying to fit one of these two guys in, or possibly even making two lineups with opposite of each other. All right, let's move on to the next fight. On the first FS1 prelims, we have Randy Brown versus Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall's he's running a 2-fight win streak. Randy Brown is 3-2 in the UFC. Randy Brown is a 7,800 salary. He's a minus 120 favorite. Gall is 8,400 salary, and he's a plus 100 underdog. Now, if you followed UFC at all, or if you're a casual fan and you've watched WWE, you'll know that Mickey Gall is the guy who completely destroyed CM Punk in his debut. And then went on. He won his last fight as well pretty decisively against Sage Northcutt. Derailed that hype train. Randy Brown, he's a technical striker. He's got a boxing background. He likes to keep the fight standing. Both these guys, at their price, they're very intriguing when it comes to roster building. It depends on how you feel on Gall. If you feel that he's going to be able to take Brown down and turn him into a pretzel, then you have a good chance of getting a submission victory. Or if you think Brown's going to keep it standing and just turn it into a full-on, brawl on the feet, then probably pick Brown. But I want to watch more video on Randy Brown. Just a couple more fights. I only was able to catch 2 of them. Excuse me. Gall does average a lot of takedowns. He's averaged 4.66 takedowns per fight. Both these guys average 3 significant strikes per minute. So they're pretty comparable, except for the takedowns. Randy Brown only averages less than 1 takedown per fight. So it all depends on how your roster build goes, and you need the salary relief. I could see trying to fit in Randy Brown or even taking a flyer on Mickey Gall. And then, yeah, let's see how that goes. And then moving on to the next fight, we have Ovince St. Preux going up against Corey Anderson. Corey Anderson's salary is $7,200, which is very intriguing because he averages a lot of takedowns for a fight, and takedowns equal points. He averages a lot of significant strikes per minute, which is 5. Ovince St. Preux, he is single-handedly renamed the Von Flue choke almost to the OSP, the St. Preux choke. Von Flue choked Yushin Okami in his last fight. Both these guys have a good chance of scoring a decent amount of points. Ovince St. Preux's salary is $9,000, which is really high, and he's a minus 160 favorite according to Vegas. Anderson's $7,200 salary is a plus 142 underdog. If you understand MMA DFS, takedowns equal points, get you up the leaderboard, significant strikes, all that fun stuff. Both these guys have an opportunity to score points. But if somebody's going to get finished, or if it's going to be a grinding type battle, I can see this going to the distance and possibly be a decision victory either way. But Corey Anderson's salary at $7,200, it's almost like a free square. And then Ovince St. Preux, if you're building a cash lineup, you could fit both these guys in there. They should score a decent amount. Moving on to the next fight, we have Walt Harris versus Mark Godbeer. Harris's $8,800 salary, he's a minus 345 favorite. And Godbeer $7,400 salary is a plus 285 underdog. This fight was actually rescheduled from the last couple fights ago. Harris actually stepped in to fight for Fabricio Verdum because of Derek Lewis had to step out due to back injury the day of the fight. Initially, Mark Godbeer tweeted out that he thought he was going to get the fight, and it ended up going to Walt Harris. But the heavyweights, I love heavyweight fights because they usually don't go the distance. So it's this one is going to be very interesting. I want to see. I actually like both these guys. Just for the KO power, if I'm going to do a multiple lineup entry, I'm definitely going to have a variation of Walt Harris and a Godbeer variation. So Walt Harris in one, Godbeer in the other. And then because they both have extreme knockout power, Walt Harris has a wrestling base, and then he's just basically gonna. He's finished 10 of his wins by knockout. Godbeer's the same thing. He's finished 5 of his last 6 victories have been by knockout. So that's that. Especially if it's an early KO, those are huge points. Usually, knockouts are usually anywhere between 100. If it's an early KO, it could be 130 to 140 points, depending on how many significant strikes or takedowns were landed before that. But yeah, I don't see this one going to the judges. I think both these guys are viable GPP options, especially with the knockout power that they have. All right, moving on to the next fight, we have 2 of the lightweight division's best prospects in Joe Duffy and James Vick. Vick is a huge 6'3", 76-inch reach advantage guy. He averages 4 strikes per minute. Very good boxing, solid submission skills. Duffy is a very technical boxer. He also is one of the only guys to have ever beat Conor McGregor. So that's fairly interesting as well. And James Vick, his salary on DraftKings is 7,700. He's a plus 150 underdog. Duffy's 8,500 salary, and he's a minus 170 favorite. I don't see this fight going to the ground. I think it's going to be an exciting stand-up battle where these guys just tattoo each other for 3 rounds, and then it goes to a decision. So both of them are viable. I like both these guys for roster builds, and should be a decent amount of strikes landed. I'm not sure if anybody's going to get finished, which is very possible when it comes to a fight, but at the same time, I like both these guys for roster building. All right, moving on to the main card, we have Johnny Big Rig Hendricks going up against Paulo the Razor Borrachina Costa. Now, Johnny Hendricks is he's a wrestler, of course. He's a former welterweight champion, but he has struggled since losing his belt to Robbie Lawler, and he's pretty much been on a downward spiral, going 2-4 with some pretty bad losses. He has pretty solid wrestling, and he is a collegiate level wrestler, and he has insane knockout power. But at the same time, this was all pre-USADA. I'm not saying that he was on any juice or anything like that, but it's just pretty interesting how USADA testing came in. All of a sudden, he sort of slimmed up a little bit. And not necessarily slimmed up, but he deflated. He didn't look as muscular. He's more chubby. Going up against Paulo Borrachina. Borrachina actually is a nickname. It means little rubber. His brother was called Rubber Man, and since he's his little brother, they gave him the nickname of Little Rubber. But he's got a BJJ background. He throws heavy punches, and he's always moving forward. Very athletic, and the only thing is his ground game hasn't been tested yet, just because he's finished both of his fights pretty convincingly. Hendricks does average 3.92 takedowns per fight, 3.47 strikes per minute. Paulo averages 8.8 strikes per minute, and he hasn't necessarily had any takedowns because his fights haven't lasted that long. Hendricks' salary is 7,300. He's a plus 190 underdog. Borrachina's 8,900 salary, and he's a minus 230 favorite. Personally, I like both these guys just for the knockout power, the potential that they have. It could end quickly. And so depending on how the roster build goes, there's a lot of abnormal pricing that's going on. So let's move on to the next fight. We have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson going up against Jorge Masvidal. Thompson's salary 8,600. He's a minus 185 favorite. Masvidal 7,600 salary, and he's a plus 160 underdog. Thompson is a very decorated kickboxing champion. He has a black belt in Kempo Karate. He's got a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu. Very patient, calculated striker. He's going to use his kicks to keep engaged distance, and then he's also going to almost a stick and move type action in and out. He's going to want to be very patient when it comes to fighting Masvidal. Masvidal is 9-5 in the UFC. If you're not familiar with Masvidal, go to YouTube and look up Gamebred, Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. He became a YouTube sensation with Kimbo Slice's backyard street fights, where he fought majority of the time bigger guys, especially Kimbo's protege Ray, where he pretty much dusted him every time. Masvidal is a well-rounded fighter. Crisp boxing. He likes to apply pressure. He has solid jiu-jitsu. And for being a taller guy, he's actually pretty hard to take down. For roster building, I like both these guys just because of the fact that their high strike outputs. 3.72 significant strikes for Thompson, 4.23 for Masvidal. Masvidal has almost 2 takedowns per fight, and Thompson is less than half, just because he likes utilizing his karate, where he does a lot of leg kicks, kicks to the body, head kicks, all that fun stuff. But roster building, I like both of them, just because it's middle of the road, and they both have solid point potential. Now moving on to the co-main event, which is Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who's 9,200 in salary. She's a minus 600 favorite, going against Rose Namajunas, $7,000 in salary and a plus 450 underdog. Now, Jędrzejczyk is a 6-time defending champion, is a world-class striker, stiff jabs, insane leg kicks. She likes to chop her opponent's legs out. Precision combinations. Everything timing is just ridiculous with this lady. She has a Muay Thai background. Now Rose, on the other hand, is she's a grappler. She Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, submission skills, very flashy strikes on her feet, spinning kicks, elbows, throws them from all different directions. From a roster build standpoint, Rose's salary at $7,000. I could see this fight possibly going 3 rounds. Jędrzejczyk is a high output striker. She averages almost 7 strikes per minute. Good takedown defense. Rose averages 3.51 strikes per minute, and she averages 3 takedowns per fight. Jędrzejczyk has really good takedown defense. She usually makes her opponents pay for shooting in for a takedown, so I'm not sure if it's going to work out for Rose's takedowns, but it's possible that this just turns into a striking battle, and it's just literally a slugfest for the whole fight. Rose is very intriguing at $7,000. Huge salary relief. It's basically, if you put in Rose, it's almost a free square where you can pretty much build anything you want when it comes to your roster, but you have to make sure you pick the right ones, pick the correct knockouts. And then moving on to the co-main event, we have Cody Garbrandt, 8,300 salaries, minus 175 favorite. Going up against TJ Dillashaw, 7,900 salary, plus 155 underdog. Now these guys are both former teammates at Team Alpha Male. They've had a very ugly breakup. Garbrandt accused Dillashaw of hurting their teammate with during practice, and Dillashaw, of course, denies it. Both these guys are grapplers. They're very familiar with each other because they've trained with each other a lot. Garbrandt is currently the bantamweight champion. Dillashaw is the former champion. I could see their wrestling canceling each other out, even though Dillashaw is probably the more polished wrestler, and Garbrandt is probably the more polished striker. Garbrandt has a lot of precision strikes, and he throws punches with bad intentions. As you saw in his last fight against Dominic Cruz, he was able to stuff the takedowns from Cruz and keep the fight standing. If that happens with this Dillashaw fight, you've seen another Dillashaw fights where he can't take his opponent down, and he gets frustrated, and it throws him off his game plan basically. But this should be a really good fight. especially both of them are high output strikers. 3.58 for Garbrandt, 5.38 for Dillashaw. Um, Garbrandt averages just over 1 takedown per fight, and Dillashaw averages almost 2 takedowns per fight. From a roster build standpoint, their price is very, very appealing. $8,300 in salary isn't necessarily overboard, but at the same time, this is a tough fight to pick. If you go anywhere, you can have, if you look at 50 different or 100 different sites, 50 of them are going to say Garbrandt, 50 of them are going to say Dillashaw. It's probably split right down the middle, and rightfully so. Both these guys are pretty evenly matched, but I just think Garbrandt might be rising, and I'm not saying Dillashaw is falling, but at the same time, Garbrandt's on fire, so I think he's might have the edge on this one. Now, moving on to the main event, we have Michael Bisping, 8,100 salary, so minus 105 favorite, going up against excuse me, George St. Pierre, 8,100 salary, and he's a minus 115 favorite. George St. Pierre, technically, in his last fight, he didn't retire, per se. He basically said he needs to hang up his gloves for a while. Now, when Joe Rogan asked him, are you retiring? He didn't necessarily answer that. The whole time when he was fighting, he's always been a big proponent of leveling the playing field, and he's always been outspoken with people that have been, or under the assumption that they have been on performance-enhancing drugs. And he's always been one of the guys that's really outspoken on it, which is pretty funny because Bisping has accused St. Pierre of being on PEDs. Now, St. Pierre he was a welterweight champion. He fought. He's been the champion at 170 pounds, and he's moving up to 185 to fight Bisping. Now, he's always been the bigger fighter at 170. I don't see the weight fighting at the higher weight class as big of a deal as some people have. What I do see is basically the time away. Now, the time away he's been away from the UFC, he's trained 5-6 days a week, working on his reflexes, working on his striking, his jiu-jitsu, making himself a better fighter, clearing his mind. And this is the first time that he's going to go into a fight being injury-free. Now, Bisping, on the other hand, he's a two-time champion. The fight against Rockhold, honestly, I don't know. Rockhold hasn't necessarily looked the same in any of his fights. I mean, he in Rockhold's last fight, he did win pretty decisively, but Bisping caught him with a pretty solid hook and put him down, and then just got him against the cage and just pounded him out. Bisping is a very aggressive, come-forward fighter that applies a lot of pressure. He averages 4.4 strikes per minute. Very heavy output. Likes pressuring his opponents with just relentless barrage of strikes from every angle. Just throws them nonstop. Does have a tendency of getting hit. And now if GSP, his power translates to 185, I could see this being one-sided. A lot of people are picking it Bisping. A lot of people are picking it Pierre. But at the same time, a fight's a fight, and once they close that cage, it's anybody can win. So, roster building wise, they're both evenly priced. I mean, it's possible, like I said or mentioned earlier, if I do multiple lineups, there's possibly I'll do a Bisping variation with a St. Pierre variation, and then match it up both ways with the Harris Godbeer type thing, and then see if I could fit in some of the other guys that I like. Make sure that if you do sign up to check out my premium article that's going to come out on Friday after weigh-ins. That'll give you who I'm picking and who my GPP and cash locks are. And you can visit, if you go to ystake.com, I'm always in there. You can check me out, message me through Twitter. There's a MMA chat in the premium content that will allow you to message me as well. Post your questions in there. Ask me anything about roster builds and all that fun stuff, and I'll be there to help you out. As always, everybody be safe out there and have fun, and I look forward to chatting with you guys. If you have any questions, just let me know. And all right, have fun.
Yeah.